it's disappointing that the Governor-General has declined to provide further clarification. The Governor-General has to act on the advice of the government. So no one doubts that. But he is entitled, this is a long-standing precedent from the Queen, his behaviour dating back centuries, to advise, warn and counsel. And if he had any basis for knowing that this was an overlapping appointment by Morrison, he should have raised a series of important questions about why was it necessary and how is the overlap going to be dealt with. So my basic argument is that he seems to have, although he could clarify otherwise, to have failed to advise, counsel and warn against what was a very ill-advised set of appointments.
You say that he, as Governor-General, is entitled to question the Prime Minister when asked to do something, but it is a fine line, isn't it? How far can a Governor-General go in asking for information of the Prime Minister/government of the day?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. It's a fine line. They should not refuse, and they shouldn't refuse to act once a clarification or an answer has been given. But, the Governor-General is not there to cut ribbons. Ultimately, the Governor-General there is to uphold the Constitution. And if there are any questions about whether actions are being taken that are contrary to the Constitution, he or she has to ask really tough questions and say, why are we doing this? How are you going to ensure transparency and accountability, and that we don't have some sort of breach of responsible government? And so they're entitled to ask reasonable questions and demand reasonable answers. They can't demand that their view prevails.
You mentioned when contrary to the Constitution. Is that how you see this?
So our Constitution comprises a range of written instruments, the fundamental text of the Constitution, and more informal norms or conventions. And this goes against a kind of basic structural commitment to responsible government, which is we have to hold individual ministers accountable to Parliament. And we can't do that if we don't know who they are. Parliament can't hold ministers to account who are secret ministers, and ministers can't exercise proper oversight of their departments if they don't have full authority. Now, in most of these instances, it was pretty hypothetical because Morrison never exercised the power, but he did eventually, and that shows us the slippery slope and the danger to our arrangements if this kind of behaviour is just put down to a sort of small misjudgment, oh, never mind, move on, because it's a serious mistake to accept this as a legitimate form of exercise of public power. It can't be repeated, and it should be censured as inappropriate and inconsistent with responsible government, which is a key part of our constitutional order.
And so what do you believe are the questions the Governor-General should have asked?
The first question should have been, is this really necessary? Maybe at the beginning of this process in March of 2020, Morrison was somewhat concerned about illness and the capacity to fill key roles, but ministers have the ability to delegate their responsibilities to another member of the cabinet. And if I were the Governor-General, I would have said, surely these existing arrangements are sufficient, Prime Minister, to address your concern. So why is this necessary should have been the first order concern and question. And the second is, if the Governor-General accepted the Prime Minister's contention about necessity, the question would have been about how do we assure appropriate accountability? Have you informed your colleagues? Have you consulted Cabinet? Do you intend to inform the Australian people? Why or why not? It's the Prime Minister's decision, but he needs to be subject to the accountability that comes from a dialogue with the head of state, because that is the job of the head of state, to advise, counsel and warn, not just to rubber stamp the decision of the executive.
Has this episode shown that Australians should know more about the day-to-day role and duties that the head of state is carrying out?
Well, I think Australians have pretty good political instincts, actually, which is it's always good to learn more about how our system works. But if you sort of take the temperature right now, I think the political temperature is, this is not right, this shouldn't have happened this way. And it's mainly Morrison's behaviour that should be questioned, but we want to understand better how the Governor-General acted, to understand whether he did the utmost within his powers to promote the Constitution. So more knowledge is always desirable, but I'm also heartened by the good sense of most Australian voters responding to this in a perfectly calm, but puzzled way and saying, surely this is not how things should operate.
Anthony Albanese has asked for a review from the Solicitor General of how these events took place, going to the legality of the actions which took place. Do you have thoughts on what that review is likely to reveal?
Well, of course, the great thing about reviews is you get access to confidential material that the rest of us at the commentariat don't have. So I do want to say that, you know, I would love to know more about exactly what happened and what material was presented to Mr. Morrison, and then passing that on to the Governor-General. But my guess is that the review will find, as I've said, that there has been a breach of norms surrounding responsible government, that the actions were inappropriate and in breach of constitutional norms by Morrison. But it is important to notice that means that his actions would have been invalid or contrary to norms, but not illegal in the sense that you and I might talk about it of, I'm going to get a speeding ticket. They're not criminal breaches or civil breaches of the kind you can be sued for. They're just breaches of the good government norms that we depend on for a well-functioning democracy. And if the Prime Minister was still in office, that would obviously have severe consequences for public confidence and might even lead to a no confidence motion.